Okay, so for this demonstration, we are going to be demonstrating the use of the Flusso TFI occlusion valve. So the purpose of the Flusso is to avoid derecruiting the lung when you're having to disconnect the vent circuit for whatever reason, whether it be to move lines, whether it be to adjust something or place a ballard in line, or whether it be getting ready to transport a patient. So right now, I have a Hamilton C6 and a Hamilton G5 that have the exact same settings dialed in. So the G5, for the purpose of the demo, would be considered our transport ventilator. So I have pressure control settings of 15, a rate of 16, and 12 of PEEP set in. So before I start using the Flusso valve, I'm going to demonstrate what it looks like when we normally disconnect for a transport. So really observe the pig lungs during this process. So I have my vent circuit at the ready. I have my settings dialed in that match my other vent, so I'm ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is place the vent in standby. I'm going to disconnect from the flex tube and the ballard, connect the other circuit, hit start. So as you can see, the pig lungs really significantly lost a lot of pressure, even during that first couple of seconds. And this did not take me long to transition, and there was a significant amount of derecruitment that happened there. So now I'm going to reconnect to the C6, so I'm going to place the vent in standby, disconnect from the ballard, reconnect the circuit, and this is usually the amount of time it takes, and then start ventilation. So as you can see, the lungs definitely de-recruited at that point. So I'm going to kind of let them recruit back up here just a second. So now for this one, I'm going to engage the Flusso valve. So I'm going to do the same process, but I'm actually going to engage the Flusso valve. Now, one thing to keep in mind when using the Flusso valve is that you are essentially going to be using just one hand to disconnect and reconnect the circuit, because your other hand has to remain on the valve, engaging the valve closed the entire time. There are no lips and tabs that are going to hold this valve closed on its own. It is for a safety reasons. You must keep this pinched down, and then once you release it, then ventilator flow can actually flow through the valve again. So what we're going to do is I'm going to have my circuit at the ready. Let's not let it disconnect there. I have my circuit at the ready, and I am going to place my vent in standby. Before I hit my standby button, before I activate standby, I am going to pinch down the valve. So I'm going to engage the valve, activate standby, disconnect from the ballard and the flex tube, reconnect the circuit, and I'm going to start ventilation and then release the valve. So as you saw, there wasn't a whole lot of derecruitment that happened during that period of time. The lungs actually maintained a significant level of PEEP at that point. Why? Because we are completely occluding the ET tube, we are completely occluding the patient's airway in order to maintain that positive pressure. So now I'm going to do the reverse. I'm going to reconnect to the C6. So before I activate my standby, I am going to pinch the valve closed, activate standby, have my circuit break apart, reconnect the other circuit, start ventilation, and release the valve. So it is very simple. It is gonna take a little bit of getting used to. It's a little awkward at first because when your valve is engaged, you cannot use your hand that you're engaging the valve. You have to do everything one-handed. One thing I did notice when I was going through connecting and reconnecting the circuits is when you're disconnecting from the ballard and the flex tube. So the first time around, I did just disconnect up here. It was a little awkward. It was very hard to get the circuit reconnected. So the easiest and most efficient way is to disconnect from the flex tube right here at the ballard. It makes it a little bit easier and a little bit more leverage for you to get that circuit reconnected. So the valve stays in place at all times. It doesn't have a lot of dead space. It's only about a 1.8 cc's of dead space total, so with adult patients that's not significant. And again, I do want to reiterate, you can pass your suction right through, and you can get all the way down as deep as you need to be. And then you would just suction right back through it. So, as I said before, the valve is to be remained in place the entire time the patient's on the ventilator. And anytime you have to disconnect the vent, you'll have that valve ready for you. So if you just have to disconnect to move lines around, or if you have to disconnect to change the ballard, it's very simple. Again, you're going to activate standby, so you're going to pinch down the valve before you hit standby, disconnect from the Flusso, do what you need to do. As you can see, the lungs are still holding a good amount of recruitment there. Start ventilation. So it's a very simple process. I would say that the only thing that is hindering is the fact that you are only going to have one hand available to do everything, because you have to continuously engage the valve. You cannot just let go, otherwise you're going to lose all that recruitment, and then there's no point of the valve. So I hope this was useful as far as being more comfortable using the valve, and really visually seeing what can happen when we don't use the valve compared to what we do when we do use the valve. So hopefully that was helpful.